Mic'd up.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Hall of Fame Conversations, brought to you by the Florida Sports Hall of Fame. I'm joined today by Florida Sports Hall of Famer Barry Smith, and we have a special guest today in the Florida Sports Hall of Fame for soccer. It's Winston DuBose. Winston, welcome to Hall of Fame Conversations.
Thank you. I'm just one of the few soccer people in there. So, this is a rare interview, very rare.
Very deserving. Very deserving.
Well, for our listeners out there, the purpose of these podcasts here is we actually are going to attach these to our website, the Florida Sports Hall of Fame website. It's www.flasportshof.org, and that's our website out there. And for our listeners out here, too, in case you missed some of the rest of the podcast, the link will be up on all of our Florida Sports Hall of Fame social media. And this podcast is brought to you by Mic'd Up. And they're the folks that are allowing us to have these wonderful interviews. So with our listeners, we just want to introduce again Winston DuBose. Now, there's probably 3 pages of biography on Winston, but in general, we can say
that John, very small pages.
Well, I'll tell you what, when you have your own Wikipedia out there, you have your own Wikipedia page, you have made it. I mean, I still don't have enough out there for a Wikipedia page yet, but you do. But yeah, University of Central Florida, U.S. men's national team, North American Soccer League, particularly in the Tampa Bay area, the Tampa Bay Rowdies. And I know there's a lot more to your career on that. So why don't you just give us a quick rundown of your soccer career?
Okay, well, I can briefly do that in about 3 sentences. Fortunately, I'll try to be brief. I grew up in Orlando and went to a parochial school there called Trinity Prep. I went to UCF, which previously was called Florida Technological University. And it had about 4 buildings, a man and its dog, and about 12,000 people when I went there back from 73 to 77. But the fascinating thing is that there's a coach there named Jim Rudy, who young coach from Rollins College. He graduated from, he loved soccer. And he had a successful college coaching career aside from UCF. But during that time, he really helped me a lot as a soccer player, as a goalkeeper. And as a result, I think I'm their first All-American and 3-time All-American. So there's not many in the soccer category or in the athletic category that happened to. But I was very fortunate. Thank God for that. And then I got drafted by Tampa. And the Rowdies were one of the best teams, if not the best team in the North American Soccer League during its heyday, probably from 77 to 84. So I played in Tampa, 2 soccer bowls. We lost both of them, unfortunately. But we had very good teams, a lot of attendance, and had played some of the best players in the world against them. Pele, Johan Cruyff, George Best, Johan Neeskens, Canalia. I mean, you name them, they came to this country to play during those times. Franz Beckenbauer, excellent players, and they weren't 50 years old when they came here either. And we had no slouches on our team. Rodney Marsh, excellent players, Steve Wagerly, and I think Peter Anderson. We had some of the best American players, North American, Wes McLeod, Perry Vanderbeck, people like that. And I think that was our strength as a team. I got traded to Tulsa, and that's where we won a championship in '83. And during those years, I was fortunate enough to get selected to play in the national team, the men's national team. Well, the 2 nemesis were Mexico and Canada. As things go, we never qualified for the World Cup because they were just better teams than we were. As time rolls on, 30 years later, things have changed. And the U.S. is probably top in the group with now Canada, as they call it, the HEX, the 8 teams in CONCACAF. So, I managed to play from 79 to 85 on the national team. And it was never full time. It was always in the fall. And World Cup venues, World Cup qualifications. So, and I also, during that time, had an opportunity to play in the UK and trained and played in the reserves for Southampton and Ipswich Town. And then I had the opportunity to play at a second division team called Oldham, which is Joe Royal coached it, very famous English coach. Willie Donahue was the second command. And it was a loan agreement in '88 with Tampa and Oldham. And fortunately, I think I was the first American to do that. Now, since then, Americans it's hard still, have played in England, at the top tier. And you'll be familiar with Pulisic and Weston McKennie and Aronson. Some of the goalkeepers would be Casey Keller, Brad Friedel, Tim Howard more recently. So they all had great careers. And after that, I pretty much finished. The Rowdies played in a league called APSL, American Professional Soccer League, played in there, had some all-star um, berths in that league, and finished up in '92 when I was, kind of old and feeble at 36. So that was briefly in a nutshell. And from there, we didn't make much money when were playing in those times. Not
I
complaining.
understand that. I understand that, Winston. The NFL wasn't paying anything either.
I think you're right. I think baseball, if I'm right, around 1977, I think the average salary in Major League Baseball, believe it or not, was around 25,000 in 1977. It's changed drastically. I'm sure in the NFL, it's the same thing. Unions probably weren't even established back then. That helped a ton in getting wages and minimums up. More importantly, healthcare. So I really, what are you going to do? And did have some money, but you're not going to live on that the rest of your life. And fortunately, another friend of mine, Peter Anderson, who played with me on the Rowdies, and is a friend, and another gentleman, Frank Mann. We started Bayshore Technologies. Prior to that, I worked for a man, Mark Lindsay, who had a company called Megabyte International, all computer related, HP, Citrix, Microsoft. So when Peter and Frank started the company in 1997, we started with little capital and we grew it to 50 people and sold it at a $37 million revenue in 2012. And so we were very fortunate, and I really enjoyed that a lot from a business perspective. And, it taught me a lot in the business world. Peter's an excellent businessman, and my other partner, Frank Mann, was excellent with services. So at that time, our company managed to do very well in this market, in the Central Florida market. So we were very proud of that. And that probably brings me up to when we got bought out. I finished up in 2015 with the company that bought us, which at that time was called Vology. And we stayed there for a while, and that was it. So now, fortunate and blessed to be able to do things that I really want to do, which is still keeping a hand in youth soccer and also working with the Boys and Girls Clubs on a program for young men and women, 7, 8, 9 years old, teaching them soccer with some people like Perry Vanderbeck is helping me and other soccer folks. We're trying to build that out around the Tampa area. Do some work with an organization called 68 Hours of Hunger, which is delivering food to different schools in the Hillsborough County area. The premise being no food on the weekend, 68 hours for some of these kids. So there's a lot of really good sponsors that help with that. Those type of things. I'm also involved with C.S. Lewis Society, which is a Christian apologetics organization. So yeah, those things all keep me busy at the present time. Plus, Janet Wing, my girlfriend, she's kind of drives me crazy too. So it's all good. You guys
You're
know
also playing. You're also playing a little bit of golf.
a little bit, yeah, very just enough to keep my 11 or 12 index intact. I do love golf. I do love it, and I've met a lot of great people through golf. And at one time, Wes McLeod and I had a foundation that we did golf tournaments to benefit life-threatening illnesses like ALS and
Right.
American lung, Moffitt cancer, things like that. We've since not doing that in a while, but Yeah, that was, I love that game. You can
Well,
never, I mean,
remember
the
we got
greatest
a
game in the
golf
world
game.
was soccer, but golf's a very close second, that's for sure.
Well, remember we got a standing game here at Pasadena as soon as you can free up.
Oh, no, 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 no. I know. I love to play with Mr. Smith because he likes music in the cart and he's freewheeling. So it's great.
There you go.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. Winston, Barry, and I, throughout the years, we've been involved with different organizations. One of them's the NFL alumni, and one of the
Yeah.
key things about the NFL alumni is that former players and a lot of the players don't play that long. Yeah, they may only play 2, 3 years, 4 years to be vested in the pension plan, and so there's a career after their competitive football. In the same way with the PGA of America, you play the PGA Tour, but if you don't pan out there, what do? Well, you might join the PGA of America, and it teaches you how the business side of the game of golf and allows you to extend your career. So one of the key things we've noticed that are really good with athletes are really great in business. And I think I know some of the reasons why, but you were really great in business too, and you're a great athlete. So what attributes did you take from the world of competitive soccer and bring them into your successful business career?
That's a really good question. I think there's something that people normally don't talk about, and I don't know if Barry experienced that or you experienced it. Barry's career, you 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 you're motivated a lot, believe it or not, by fear of failure. There's no there's no real backup when you're playing. Sports are great to be in. Number one, it's hard to get there,
Yep.
and it takes a lot of other people helping you to get there, just not yourself, believe it or not. And then to stay there is tough. But the fear of failure is huge. At least the more successful people I know, yes, that's huge. I think if you ask anybody in soccer or anybody in golf, they don't want to, they don't want to fail. They don't want to go back. They want to make the cut. They want to get paid on that Sunday, and have a good tournament. They want to stay. So that's one. I think that brings the other side of it, brings in as a business side of it. You're out there, you have no VC, it's your own money. You got to work your butt off and you got to use the time appropriately. You don't want to fail. You just turn around and you go, you got 10 people you're supporting and now 15 people and now 20, 30, 40. It just keeps getting bigger. And does it get easier? I don't know if it ever gets easier, but it certainly gets to a point where you can, you don't have to run around like a chicken with your head cut off doing every single thing. But the fear of failure is huge to me in that as well. So, and it also taught me a lot. It's really funny. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And I think it's the same in sports. I think it's the same. You see the gifted ones in sports, you turn around, they can't miss. But for some reason, they do miss. And a lot of times they take that for granted. And they take your athletic ability for granted, being on that team for granted. And that's something that I know that I never took that for granted. And I always prided myself on trying to be the hardest worker and just outworking other people that were better than I was or more talented than I was. And fortunately, that did occur to me in several times in my career, and it worked good for me. And I think the same thing in business, just giving your all and just outworking the competition is huge. I think because a lot of people nowadays they want to clock in at 8 and leave at 5, and it's just not good enough. To me, if you want to be really successful, that's just my humble opinion on it. I don't know how Barry feels about it.
Love it. Love it. Winston, here's a question I've always wanted to ask you, and for some reason I never do. You obviously were an outstanding athlete. We'll put it in the past tense. Okay, we're all a
Yes.
little stressed.
Intents and purposes, yes.
Okay, but number one, being a three-time All-American is huge. You're fortunate if you become an All-American one time, so you're three-time. Obviously, you're a great athlete. You're born and raised there in the Orlando. My question to you is, especially back then, why did you go? Why didn't you go into football or baseball or something like that? Because you are a gifted athlete. And then, what was your journey what determined that you went down the soccer path?
That's a really good question, Barry. So I love baseball. My dad was a big baseball guy. He um he actually knew Leo DeRocher. He was at the World Series
Wow.
with the Giants when they played, and he was a big baseball guy. And he had me in Little League, Pony, Big League. I love baseball. And there were, I think, towards the end of my high school time, there was a couple of teams that were interested, but but what happened was in my junior year in high school, I didn't start soccer till I was 15, 16. I was playing baseball all the time, but
Okay.
my friends in high school said, "We need a goalkeeper. Why don't you come out and play?" And that's how that happened. And so I love football too. I never played organized football or organized basketball, but I loved all those sports. The difference, Barry, is I kind of felt that I love catching the ball. I love being wide receiver like you were in
Yeah,
football,
man.
and
Yep.
quarterbacks throwing the ball to me when, messing around and stuff like that. So I managed to take all of that and I love diving around. I love going up for balls, crosses, like you would catch something over the middle. It would be the same for me going up for crosses. I love that. I love snagging those balls. I loved working hard. I love the energy and the diving and the whole thing, then the kicking and the distribution. So that kind of got to me. And I think there was a big game. I grew up in Winter Park. So there's a big game young that probably set me on that path. I was still playing baseball in big league and high school. Big league was equivalent to American Legion back then. And the interesting thing for me was we went to 10 overtimes in the county championship against Winter Park High. And it was, we were bombarded by Winter Park. They were clearly the better team, but I just happened on the day to have a really good day. And they beat us 1-0 in like the 10th overtime. And everybody made a big deal out of it, including the Winter Park High coach, who eventually coached me at FTU, Jim Rudy. So that kind of set me on that path. So when my dad said, you got to pick one or the other, I went, I'm a decent fielder. I hit the ball okay, but I don't know that, I'm a major league guy to go out and bang out all the home runs and do all that. I like this sport. And so it kind of, it was something that kind of grew into me. So I had to give my baseball up and gave my uniform to the big league coach, and and I gave it to him, and he went, "You're crazy." I went, well, yeah. Well, my father told me I had to pick one or the other, so I picked soccer, and so he really made me, in a good way, kind of focus on one thing. I was not a Bo Jackson or, could do everything and all that stuff. So I wasn't ever at that kind of caliber. So he made me pick. I think it made me focus. And I think he really helped me. He was a general in the Air Force. So he was very focused on that. And you can't do everything, pick one. So, thank God it worked out well for me.
You did it
Hey,
well.
Winston, I got a question for you here. It just came out. Now, this is more of a technical question, and I've
Sure.
always admired goalkeepers because there's such a fine line there between guessing where the ball's going to go, reacting where the ball's going to go,
Yeah.
even have that intuition where the ball's going to go.
Mhm.
What in the world goes on when? Because it's a split second. You have to decide what to do, where to jump, where to block, what to do. What
Right.
goes on in your mind there? What happens in those instances?
That's a good question. I think just like Barry did when he was doing it, and you prepare. I think preparation is huge. So you get more, the more games you play, and the more you're thrown into that environment. Sure, the first few games, Eddie Fermani put me in '77 when they were, we were winning 4-0 against Connecticut. He said, "Just don't screw it up." He didn't use screw it up. He used a different word, but Eddie Fermani. So, he put me in with only 16 minutes left. So I couldn't do, but yeah, you're not even prepared for that because it's your first professional game. You hope, what you're doing in practice is good enough. I didn't play much my rookie year. There was a better goalkeeper in front of me, Paul Hammond. But the point is that yeah, you just like Barry, I'm sure in his first NFL game, you go out there the first preseason, you're wow. I mean, everything's faster, quicker. I mean, everything moves faster, and no amount of practice helps. So you got to play games. And I think to answer your question, in when you prepare and practice for as many game situations as you can, and work as hard as you can, you go in there feeling pretty good. If you if you fail to prepare to fail. Right? A friend of mine, Ron Fisher, told me that. Very good soccer player. So that is huge for me. And I think Barry might agree with that. And I think as you play on and you get used to, the environment, and it's not so daunting anymore, and you can concentrate on those moments that you almost kind of slow things down in your mind. And I've heard other people say that, other really, different sports, things just go slower for you. And you're able to laser focus on certain things. And that helped me a lot. I mean, plus two, when you're playing, like when players are coming at you from different angles because you practice, you want them doing certain things if they're right-footed or left-footed to make it hard on them and make it easier on you. So you play the odds, right? So if there's a right-footed player coming down the field all alone, say for instance, you don't go and stand on his left foot and let him have a right-footed shot. You stand on his right foot. Make him play the hard shot across your body. That's an example, right? Just an example of something. And I think the more situations you get in, and the more comfortable and familiar you are. It's like in sales too. The more objections you get, and you're used to answering objections because you've heard them 500 times before, it's more comfortable for you. And I think that's the same way it is in golf when you're in match play. I mean, you're playing a match for your club. I mean, you're nervous, but I guess the more matches you play, the more comfortable you are in that situation. You know what I'm saying, John? I mean, I played this fall for TPC in match play. I didn't win a match, but I learned a lot, and you kind of learn a lot about yourself and how to cope with that. So if I get the opportunity another time, hopefully I can, do a little bit better. That's all. I think
Well, you know,
so.
the hardest shot in golf actually for golfers, especially competitive golfers, is the tee shot on number one,
Yeah.
the first shot of the day. And I'll tell you why, because if you're not really ready just to absolutely go throw up, you're just not into it yet. And so you got to be careful. But once you
That's a
hit
good
that first
point.
shot, you're down the fairway, you're good to go. You know, you're good to go the rest of the day. But it's that first shot, especially you're talking about your rookie year and getting thrown into a game. It's like you're playing in your first tour event, and you happen to be teeing off at a busy time for some reason, and everybody's starting to peer over the gallery ropes down the fairway on the first hole to see who's teeing off, right? You know, it gets pretty narrow there, and you're wondering about, okay, what kind of liability policy do I have with this
Yeah.
tournament, and go
Yep.
from
I hope
there.
the PGA has a good one. Yep. That's
Yeah.
for sure. No,
Hey,
you have a
one thing I wanted to
local
ask you
man.
about. Oh, go
Sure.
ahead, Barry.
Hey, Winston,
Mhm.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
Let's your rookie year, okay? Your rookie year, or the first couple years. What was your biggest wow? Okay, your biggest wow, either your biggest moment, the biggest game, or the stadium, the crowd, the international players who were like Pele or whatever. What was
Right.
your wow factor?
Ooh, that's a really good question too, Barry. Um, Probably the 1978 Soccer Bowl because I played in that game, and it was 78 or 80,000 in Giant Stadium against the New York Cosmos. Well, we
Yep.
had played the Cosmos several times before, but their players were Franz Beckenbauer, Carlos Alberto, Eskandarian, all international players, Giorgio Canaglia. I mean, they had Bogicevic. They had players that were world class, and you're playing on AstroTurf, And that would be, to me, a big wow moment, because that was
Yep.
the final. You know, we finished second in the league that year. It's a final. Not that we hadn't played those guys before, or I hadn't played against them before, but that was huge. It was huge for me. I mean, from that perspective, there were other wow moments along the way. I mean, another thing would be when I was just the year before, when I was at Southampton, they had some of the best players in England playing at Southampton, and I trained with those guys every day. It was Chris Nichol, Irish international, Alan Ball, England international, played in the England World Cup in '66, Peter Osgood, England international, Phil Boyer, these guys, Stevie Williams, these guys, oh my gosh, they were some of the best players in Europe, and you're training with them. So it would be like, practicing immediately and then playing a championship game with Bart Starr, or, I mean, those guys, that type of caliber straight away. And so those guys, and Ipswich had a world-class team when I went there, and Bobby Robson, who was one of the best managers ever in England, allowed me to come there and train. And it was all England internationals, all of them. I mean, the best players at that time in Europe and in England. So it was phenomenal, and we were very fortunate in Tampa too. We had some of the best players at that time in the North American Soccer League, and coming from England, like Rodney Marsh is an example, Steve Wagerly, Adrian Alston, Derek Smethurst. All of these guys were very, very, very good and accomplished. And so you're training with them right there. So there were a lot of little wow moments, but I guess that's the first big one. And maybe the other one would maybe be playing for the national team the first time, or playing at Azteca in front of, I think, 100,000 in a World Cup qualifier against Mexico. We lost, unfortunately, but it was a World Cup qualifier against Mexico, and that was a big deal for us.
Sweet.
Well, Winston, I got one final question for you here, and we appreciate your time here on the Florida Sports Hall of Fame conversations. So these days, it seems like no matter what sport you play, athletes now have an entourage. They have a trainer and a physical therapist, and they have a dietitian, and they have a psychologist, and a masseuse. Yeah, you got to have one of those in this day and age. But
can't live without the masseuse. Yeah.
So does that make them better today than that they played in your day? Does that make them any better as athletes, or is that something that's just overblown?
That's a great question, because that is a great question. I'm sure Barry's had that question before. And my answer, and I've talked to my contemporaries and talked to other people, I think my take on it is this, is that if you were able to play in the NFL back then, or when Barry played, or Joe Namath, or Bart Starr, or Johnny Unitas, those guys could still play today in the NFL. Don't forget, my opinion is this, is that if they had the football intelligence, or IQ they call it, they would be able to take advantage of everything that's given to them now. That means the weight room, the nutrition, the masseuse, the days off, the whole 9 yards. And I mean, so I firmly believe, although, all the sports have changed a lot, every one of them to a T over the last 30 or 40 years in their methodology, but there's no doubt that you would turn around and they would be able to play in today's game. There's no doubt about it. If you're good enough to play then, you're going to be good enough to play now. It's just you would be growing up in a different time. That's all. I mean, can you imagine, Barry? Sonny Jurgensen used to get down with the Redskins on one knee, and he'd be drawing stuff on the ground. He'd be bringing his Microsoft tablet to the field and drawing stuff out on the tablet, throwing it away, and then throwing the ball. I mean, that's how crazy it is. They go back to the tablets all the time. Baseball, everybody. I'm sure I'm going, what happens to putting your hand on the receiver's shoulder pad, or going up to the defender and saying, you can't do that, you got to mark them this way? Or baseball, don't, be looking for that curveball on the, coming with the 3-2 or whatever it is, or Barry, that guy's playing you this way. You got to, next time I'm going to throw it to you on your other shoulder. What happened to that? It's always, they all go and look at their iPads now.
Right.
It's totally different, but those guys. So as an example, a very famous golfer here, Gary Koch, right? Everybody knows Gary Koch.
Nice guy. Great.
There's no doubt about it. Gary Koch could play in today's PGA. He would just be a little bit different. He would, eat a little bit different and do things differently. But there's no doubt in my mind. And that means he's growing up, many years later. But he would still be able to play in the PGA Tour without a doubt. I mean, I have no doubt about those things.
Well, that's just great stuff there. In the world of golf, what you just talked about with the tablets, we call that paralysis by analysis.
Oh,
You get too much information going. Well, let's go ahead and wrap things up here. So for our listeners out there, you've been listening to Hall of Fame Conversations, brought to you by the Florida Sports Hall of Fame. If you want to go visit our website and watch this podcast, you go to www.flasportshof.org. And you also want to download the Mic'd Up app, and you'll be able to replay this over and over and over and share with your friends and families out there on the social media. So, Winston, we really appreciate your time today. We appreciate you being on, and we look forward to getting you out on the links. It sounds like you might need to give us all 2 shots aside with your golfing prowess, since you're playing a lot of golf.
No, I don't think that's the case. Will ever be the case, but we'll have a lot of fun. That's for sure. We'll have a blast.
All right, everybody. So, Winston, thank you. Barry, thank you. And thank you to our listeners for witnessing another episode of Hall of Fame Conversations. With that,
Thank
take
you,
care.
John. Thank you, Barry. Thank you very much. God bless.
Pleasure.